and drive this country's economy.
Claire Curran.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. We certainly do need confidence, and we're certainly not going to get it from that government over there. Under this government, we've lost 40,000 jobs in manufacturing under its watch. Just this year alone, more than 50,000 New Zealanders have left for Australia, so that doesn't exactly fill one with much confidence for the initiatives that they're coming up with. It's a disaster, Mr Speaker. It's a disaster, and the solutions require a hands-on approach that's designed to make some brave decisions, and brave decisions about economic development that are about joining up our economic development and having an actual strategy that's actually going to deliver some jobs down the track. This bill is a poor effort at doing that, Mr Speaker. It's more of a wet bus ticket. As you know, we support this bill with reluctance. We consider it a missed opportunity and half-baked. It's a missed opportunity to truly grow the economy, and it's typical of this government because it's not interested in the meaningful input from industry. It's not interested in a broad economic development vision, and it's not interested in a broad set of policy initiatives that make research, science and technology more accessible to New Zealand business. Instead, it's a so-called grand scheme which isn't worthy of the name, the Callaghan Innovation Bill. We need to create an environment where innovation is interconnected between the education sector, the primary, secondary and tertiary, at the tertiary levels, but also with industry, so that we're producing young people with the skills that our industry needs to innovate. And then we also need a robust scientific research community, the science providers, and we need to understand what it takes to commercialise. We need all of those things, and we need them all to be interconnected and not set apart from each other. But no, instead we've got here a piece of legislation that hasn't been properly thought out, where the industry hasn't been properly consulted, where there isn't a partnership or a collaborative approach, and where it's been rushed through in a very short space of time, which hasn't allowed the industry to fully participate and for it to be discussed. And instead we hear on the other side of the House talk about vested interests. Well, where was the proper discussion in the Select Committee that truly consulted the breadth of the industry about this bill? I'm pretty disappointed in this bill, especially since it's come out of the Education Science Select Committee that's chaired by Nikki Kaye. For this to be a good piece of legislation, it requires an understanding of 21st century learning and innovation, but it clearly doesn't. It's held in suspicion by the stakeholders, and I'm sure that my colleagues across this side of the House certainly have talked about that. It needs to have it needs to have them on board to make an innovation economy thrive. Those who did submit had very mixed views and reservations, and I've read some of those submissions. There were many who could and should, and there were many others who could and should have submitted, but were given virtually no time to do so. In contrast, Mr Speaker, I have sat on that same Select Committee for the last 6 months with Nikki Kaye chairing, considering another inquiry into 21st century learning and literacy and what is really needed to transform our education system to ensure our children become the workers of the future. The workers of the future who are equipped for the jobs of the future that we need to transform our economy. And that is a good piece of work, Mr Speaker, but this isn't. And it's sort of interesting how the dots haven't been joined. this is another critical piece of the puzzle to put in place the levers that can help that innovation occur. But this bill is very unlikely to achieve that, and it's, as I said, it's an enormous missed opportunity. I just to draw everybody's attention to part of that missed opportunity, our technology sector, which is still very much emerging and very much an important part of our future economy, we need to have the flexibility to allow the small to medium-sized enterprises, not the multinationals, the small to medium-sized enterprises to grow and innovate. And it's our third largest export earner behind dairy and tourism. It generates over $7 billion in annual revenue. Technology touches on every other major market segment, and it's our fastest growing, highest capita earning industry for the country. As we all know, on the domestic front, it contributes nearly $20 billion to New Zealand's economy and employs over 40,000 people. This very government, it's been identified under this very government that innovation is one of its 6 priority sources of economic development. But in order to get to make that happen, it's got to get serious about the work that's really needed to make science and innovation the heart of our new economy. The submissions on this bill sought to clarify sought clearly that what was needed was closer alignment with the science providers, and that there were potential conflicts of interest with the funder provider. And I note that the member across the House alluded to that, so clearly that is a bit of a sensitive issue over there. Overall, it is a disappointment, and I'd like to quickly touch on how if we had a truly collaborative institute was being established to help grow our new manufacturing industry, then there would be a much closer synergy with the stated needs of the industry. And I just want to mention our local ICT industry, which is a pretty important industry, and it's a sector that, if it was to grow to the same relative size as Australia's, it would be a $4 billion industry rather than a $3 billion one. And the government, with its $2 billion annual spend in this area in ICT, could play a really key role in that industry's development. Local IT companies are competitive, they're cost competitive, they've got a 25 to 35% cost advantage over Australian companies, and a larger cost advantage compared to Australia, to the US or the UK. And I mention this really important industry because that is what we should be thinking about. We should be joining the dots between the industries that we need to be investing in, joining the dots between our primary, secondary and tertiary education sectors, what the industry is telling us, those industries are telling us, and with our education, our tertiary education institutes. Just think what could be achieved if this government was to actively listen to its emerging industries. Not the multinationals, Mr. Speaker, but the Kiwi companies, and what the Kiwi companies are saying to us, and they're the ones that we so desperately need to foster and develop so that our kids have got jobs, and that our kids will not only have the jobs of the future, but they'll actually stay in New Zealand and not be part of the 50,000 people who have left New Zealand this year to go to Australia. So I want to end, Mr. Speaker, on a broken promise, and which is just one of the many broken promises that we've seen under this government, and that this government's become known for. It's a research funding broken promise, and the promise was to use a third of the savings from the discontinued R&D tax credit to directly fund research of $315 million over 3 years. The result has been $100 million over 4 years, and this was largely from underspent funding from the previous year and reversing other commitments. And of the total new science funding spent in 2009 and 10 on science, $44 million was unspent funding from the year before. In this bill, Mr. Speaker, this government's trying to make a big deal of all the new funding, but the reality is that while $166 million is being committed to develop this institute, most of it came from existing funding savings. It's a missed opportunity. It's not part of a joined-up strategy. It's another example of how New Zealanders have been let down.
Simon O'Connor.
Mr. Speaker, I want to step away from this conspiracy-driven Chicken Little